The Bishopsons were beloved until the sinister secrets of their cursed well were revealed. It was a sunny afternoon in Greenwood, where the Bishopsons shone bright, their laughter echoing through the perfect suburban streets. Paul flipped burgers while Rebecca handed out cold drinks. Jenna and Kyle chased laughter across their lush backyard, the air alive with the smell of grilled meats and the sound of clinking glasses. Neighbors wandered in and out. This was their paradise, or so they thought. But lurking behind their gorgeous home was an ancient well. One whispered about in hushed tones the haunted well where, decades ago, many had vanished without a trace. Initially, the tales felt like mere folklore, relics of a horrific past lost to time. But when Edgar, a local historian, uncovered bones and tales connecting the Bishopsons to these chilling disappearances, the sunny facade began to crack. A chill crept through the community as shadows deepened, glancing sideways at the once beloved family with a mix of horror and disbelief. Words turned to whispers, whispers into accusations. What secrets hide behind their manicured lawn? A neighbor muttered as they steered their children away from the Bishopsons' yard. As dusk fell and laughter faded, creaks and whispers echoed through their home. Shivers rolled down their spines. Was it just the house settling, or something more? Paul paced, clutching the curtains, watching shadows dance around the well. Jenna's laughter now felt distant, like an echo from a different world. Each passing day thickened the tension. Family dinners felt heavy, like being watched by unseen eyes. Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. One stormy night, rain lashed against the windows like 1,000 tiny fists, a desperate sound that mirrored the turmoil inside. A bone-rattling thud shook the foundations of their home, dragging them from sleep into terror. The family huddled in the living room, hearts racing. As shadows danced ominously, faint cries seemed woven into the gusts of wind drifting through the open window, a plea for help from the well. Paul's pulse quickened. Fear was a living thing, a thick fog hanging over them, as they debated whether to confront whatever dark legacy lay beneath. Whispering winds called them toward the well. The air felt alive with ancient dread, a chill wrapping around them like a snake. They stood before it, eyes wide with fear, as the night wrapped tighter around their throats. Suddenly, the ground trembled beneath their feet. Jenna screamed in terror, staggering back as the well rippled with a grotesque mirage, shadows swirling just below the surface. Fingers clawed at the darkness, twisted, gnarled faces twisted in anguish flashed beneath the water's depth. The Bishopsons were right there, on the edge, teetering into unknown horrors. Was it a curse? Were they the unwitting heirs to a darkness that had laid dormant for centuries? In that moment, the bright life they'd built shattered, their laughter drowned out by the cacophony of echoes rent from the cursed well. And as they drew closer, fear clenched within them. Had they awoken something far more sinister than they ever imagined? The storm raged on, a relentless demon hammering against their home. Paul could feel the swell of anxiety rising inside him, a relentless tide matching the tempest outside. His heart raced, drumming against his ribcage as they stood there frozen at the edge of the well, shadows shifting like something alive. "Jenna," he whispered, dread coating each syllable, "stay close." She clutched Kyle's hand tighter, her fingers pale, their knuckles white in the dim light. From the depths of the well, dark whispers mingled with the wind, incoherent yet desperate, beckoning. Each pulse of sound felt like a cold finger trailing down Paul's spine. "We shouldn't be here." Rebecca's voice trembled. She instinctively stepped back, away from the well that seemed to breathe, to shift an ancient beast stirring from a long slumber. Then, a sudden silence fell, an eerie pause before the storm too took a breath. It felt off, wrong, like nature itself was holding its breath. The moment stretched, brittle and heavy. Jenna whimpered, barely audible, the innocence in her voice cracking through the tension. What if we really did wake it up? Those words hung in the air, cold and sharp. A flicker of movement caught Paul's eye. He glanced into the well again. An even darker shadow rose from within, swirling like smoke, or was it despair? Suddenly, the wind howled back to life, a fierce gust that knocked them back, throwing them into each other like puppets pulled by violent strings. "Run!" Kyle yelled, breaking the spell that gripped them, triggering the instinct to flee. The Bishopsons stumbled away, hearts hammering in their chests, fear driving them toward the sanctuary of their house, yet the well called out to them, a sinister whisper that gnawed at their minds, seeping like poison. Inside, the house felt different. Shadows clung to the corners like dark spiders waiting to weave their webs. Paul slammed the door, gasping as though he had blocked out some outside terror. What just happened? He breathed, desperately searching Rebecca's eyes for answers. "Maybe it's not just stories," she murmured, her voice trembling as the reality settled like lead in their stomachs. Jenna paced, light dancing off her wide, terrified eyes. "We need to do something." But nothing seemed available to grasp, no actions felt right. The weight of fate pressed down on them, and the only thing louder than the storm was the increasing pounding in Paul's chest. "What if we uncover more?" Kyle's voice quivered, a thread of panic woven through it. "I saw those faces. I saw them." As if in response to their mounting dread, a low rumble shook the very foundation of their home. The walls seemed to vibrate with the swell of angry whispers, carrying the echo of past cries. In unison, their whispers rose, mingling with the storm, until the sound became nearly unbearable. "Stop it!" Rebecca clutched her temples, her voice fraying. "Please, just stop." Her words turned into a desperate plea, but the house laughed with her sorrow. "Look!" Jenna pointed toward the window, where rain-hued fingers tapped against the glass, tracing jagged shapes, a connection to the well, or perhaps the souls tangled within the roots of that ancient curse. Paul stepped toward it, despite the urge to flee. Something drew him like gravity. "I have to know. I have to understand." And that s when silence fell once again, pressing down so thickly that they could barely breathe. Then it hit, a sudden realization. The well was more than an echo of the past. It was reaching through time, seeking them, craving something long buried. He turned slowly, facing the family. "We need to dig deeper." But deep inside him, a fear ignited, a terror of what would be uncovered, of what might awaken next. They had already come too close to the secrets that lay beyond the veil. What more awaited them at the bottom of that dark abyss? As they huddled together, their next move loomed. Would they dive into this darkness, or would they succumb to the monsters waiting beyond the veil? The air grew thick and hot, wrapping around them like the grip of a predator. Paul's heart raced like a trapped animal, every thud echoing the urgent whispers flooding his mind. What if it's all true? The thought clawed at him. Shadows loomed larger in the house, and the flickering lights cast an eerie glow, making shapes dance on the walls. Maybe we should just leave," Kyle stammered. His eyes darted from the dark corners to the family, fraught with uncertainty. "Get in the car and go." "No. We can't run away," Jenna protested, her voice rising. "What if they're still out there?" She gazed through the rain-smeared window, her innocence stripped away, revealing the terror beneath. A crash of thunder shook the house, rattling the windows. The storm had upped its game, pounding against the roof like angry fists. Each clap felt like a warning. Paul moved closer to Rebecca, actually seeing the fear mirrored in her eyes. "We can't leave it like this. We have to know." The murmurs intensified, vibrating through the walls and into their bones, tapping into a primal fear deep within them. Suddenly, a loud thump reverberated from the attic, sending a jolt of panic into Paul's chest. "Did you hear that?" he whispered, barely able to find his voice. "Yes," Kyle exclaimed, nearly shouting as he jumped back, pressing against the wall. "What was that?" Rebecca's face paled. She looked to Paul, and with a slight nod, they shared the unspoken decision. "We check it out," Paul declared, the adrenaline surging through him. No, Jenna began, her fingers trembling. Stay here, Jenna, Paul said, softer now. We'll be right back. With Kyle, he crept toward the rickety staircase that spiraled up to the attic. Each step let out a creak that sounded like a warning. It's just the wind, he tried to convince himself. But part of him knew better. As they reached the attic door, Paul hesitated. The handle felt freezing, as if touched by the breath of something not of this world. He turned to Kyle, who was chewing on his lower lip, fear etched across his features. On three, Paul whispered, adrenaline making him louder than he intended. 1, 2, 3. They pushed the door open together, and the hinges screeched like a banshee. A wave of stale air washed over them, the attic entombed in shadows. What the hell? Kyle breathed. Paul strained to see, feeling the darkness fold in around them. And then he saw it, a tall chest in the corner, aged and covered in dust, standing like a tombstone amidst the chaos. Thunder rolled again, and the moment felt charged, like a prelude to horror. Do you think? Kyle started, his voice trembling. We have to find out, Paul declared, stepping toward the chest that seemed almost alive, throbbing with energy. As he reached out, a memory flickered in his mind, the stories told long ago of the well, of families who vanished, leaving only their echoes behind. The very air shifted, charged with expectancy. Just as his fingers brushed the lid of the chest, a voice, clear and commanding, broke through the storm. You shouldn't have come here. The words cut through the room like a knife, a tangible sound that sent both boys stumbling back. Shadows bled from the corners, morphing, coiling around them like a living thing. What? Paul stammered, feeling reality warp and twist. The storm outside now paled, a mere whisper against the rising cacophony within the attic. Jenna's voice rang through the chaos, terrified and distant. Paul. Kyle. What's happening? The weight of dread filled Paul's chest as he stood frozen. Whatever they were about to unleash, it was about to spill over. With every heartbeat, they lurched closer to unveiling the truth that could bind them or break them. As the shadows swirled tighter, laughter danced on the air, a haunting, childlike giggle that drifted from the depths of the attic. And Paul understood, with sickening certainty, that the well wasn't the only thing calling to them. They were not alone anymore. What have we awakened? Paul whispered, dread settling like lead in his gut as he gazed into the swirling darkness, knowing their next move was no longer in their hands. The shadows thickened, writhing like something alive. Paul felt their grip tighten, smothering hope, squeezing the breath from his lungs. We need to go. Kyle shouted, but they were glued to the spot, as if the darkness beneath their feet had become quicksand. Jenna! Paul yelled back, panic sharpening his voice. Stay inside. Lock the door. The giggling grew louder, echoing, twisting into a cacophony that was childlike yet fundamentally wrong. It rang in his ears, pulling at the fraying threads of his sanity. Get the chest open. Paul shouted to Kyle, the urgency propelling his words into the gloom. We have to see what's inside. Kyle trembled, yet the fear transformed to a flicker of rage. Are you insane? He hissed. You heard it. Something is playing with us. Or warning us, Paul replied, pressing forward despite the darkness pressing back. The attic gave an uneasy shudder, as if disturbed by their presence. He reached the chest, his fingers grazing the cool, worn wood. You know that voice wasn't just a trick, right? Kyle said, voice thick with dread. What if it's real? That's why we have to look. Paul spoke with frantic resolution. He pulled at the chest's lid, the hinges protesting like the wails of some forsaken spirit. He grimaced, his stomach knotted with uncertainty. Please don't, Kyle began, his eyes wide with terror, but the lid creaked open, revealing nothing but darkness that pooled within. It's empty, Paul said, dismayed. The relief felt wrong, like an easy breath before a plunge into icy water. Look again. A glimmer caught Paul's eye, something barely visible nestled in the shadows of the chest. Something that flickered like a whisper of a memory. He leaned closer, feeling something shift in the air around him. The giggles morphed into cries, a crescendo of anguish that clawed at him. Whatever was inside, it wasn't welcoming. "Let us get out," Kyle started, but the air turned electric, heavy with anticipation and dread. "Paul, look out!" A figure, blurred and indistinct, darted across the attic, vanishing into the black corners. Paul jerked back, instinctively reaching for Kyle, but found himself alone as the shadows shifted, intertwining in a grotesque dance of horror. "What is that?" Kyle's voice trembled, barely above a whisper, eyes wide with mounting panic. Paul struggled to focus through the darkness. The oppressive shadows seemed to breathe, in and out, as if they were alive. He could hear his heartbeat, thunderous against the suffocating silence. A form solidified, slowly emerging like a nightmarish portrait from a painter's brush, pale, translucent skin stretched tight over too much bone, eyes vast and hollow. It stood there, silent, waiting. "Run!" Kyle shouted, breaking the trance. They bolted for the door, their feet pounding against the floorboards, but it slammed shut with a deafening thud. The laughter turned into a cacophony of screams, the voices of children echoing through the attic, chasing them, mocking their fear. Paul banged against the door, adrenaline pushing every muscle to its limit, but it wouldn't budge. The air grew colder, a bitter chill soaking into their skin. Then, a low, menacing voice rolled through the room like thunder. "You've come to play, haven't you?" With horror-stricken eyes, Paul turned to Kyle. "What do we do?" The dread washed over him, thick as molasses, urging him to flee, yet he felt rooted to the spot. The shadows converged, and the spectral figure shifted closer, its hollow eyes gleaming with something hungry. "Leave or stay," it hissed, and in that moment, the choice fractured into something darker, a twisted game of survival. Emerging from the depths of the forming shadow, another voice chimed in, soft, almost sweet, like a lullaby. "You must decide, but remember, the well always thirsts." What did that mean? Confusion tangled with fear, leaving them gasping for understanding. And in the depths of that uncertainty, a singular thought loomed large: they were not in control anymore. "Paul!" Jenna's voice called, cutting through the chaos. He shot a glance back, but the shadows kept swallowing the light. Left with no choice, Paul realized whatever came next held the power to shatter them. We dive into the darkness, or we face a fate worse than death, and at that moment, the darkness surged forward, eager. Did they even have a chance to escape? But all that loomed ahead was the sinister whisper of the well, beckoning them closer with an insatiable hunger. The storm raged outside, but within, something terrible brewed, waiting for the moment to strike. Would they be able to make it on the other side, or become part of the story they feared? The shadows swallowed them, thick and suffocating. Paul felt a pull, an ancient dread clawing at his insides, urging him to step back. But there was no retreat, only the darkness loomed, thick and swirling, eager to devour everything in its path. "Get ready!" Kyle's voice broke through, shaky yet determined. He was pushing Paul forward as both of them fought against the paralysis seeping into their limbs. The air crackled with tension, a palpable force that made their skin crawl. "What do you mean, get ready?" Paul rasped, his throat dry as sandpaper. His eyes darted around, trying to make sense of the horrifying mass closing in. "We can't stay here." Suddenly, the giggles returned, surrounding them like a whirlwind. It wasn't just laughter, it felt like a taunt. A game crafted by something with sinister intent. The floorboards groaned beneath their weight, and a chill whispered through the attic, sending shivers racing down his spine. "Paul!" Jenna's voice cut through the chaos again, distant yet sharp, like shards of glass. "I'm coming." "No!" Paul shouted, horrified. "Lock the door. Stay inside." But his warning disappeared into the rushing void, like a leaf falling into an endless chasm. "Look!" Kyle gasped, pointing toward the corner where shadows twisted and writhed. Paul squinted, seeing shapes flicker in and out, a parade of silhouettes that seemed to dance to a silent rhythm. They moved with the uncanny grace of marionettes on strings, faces turning to reveal expressions too grotesque to comprehend. "What are they?" Paul choked out, clutching his head as the laughter morphed again, sinking into a symphony of wails, the sound of lost souls reaching for escape. Maybe they're trapped," Kyle said, his voice trembling as if he too could hear the despair they broadcasted. "We need to help them." A frenzied rush of bravery surged through Paul. "No!" he shouted, desperation creeping into his tone. "They want to drag us in. We can't fall for that." In an act of primal instinct, they pulled from the center of this chaos, but the door wouldn't yield. They banged against it again, pounding like drumbeats that echoed lifelessly back at them. The cold seeped in, wrapping around their throats. A sudden clarity surged within Paul. This wasn't just about escape. "There's something in the well," he murmured, a realization striking him. "That's what the whispers mean. It wants us to look." "Look?" Kyle echoed, panic bubbling beneath his skin. "Are you nuts? We need to escape." The shadows shifted, stirring with suspicion, and the piercing eyes of the specter bored into Paul. As if sensing his internal struggle, it leaned closer, an otherworldly breath brushing against his skin. "What will you do, dear child? Will you drink?" "Drink what?" he stammered, uncertainty creeping in like time itself had paused. "From the well of secrets. It can make you whole," the shadow hissed, its voice dripping with temptation. "Or perhaps, it will add to the toll." With a yell, Paul pulled Kyle back, but the wall of darkness extended, engulfing them in cold. "Choose, boys. The well never forgets," it taunted, and the shadows began to press in tighter. "I want to play your game," Paul screamed, shoving against the suffocating darkness. But beneath the shadows, he felt something ancient, turgid, a hunger seeking fulfillment, and from the shadows came that sweet, lilting voice again, now with an edge. "The well always thirsts. Will you satisfy it? Your choice could save or damn your souls." As Paul felt the edges of his grip fray, he knew they were minutes away from losing control to the dark temptation of the well. The weight of the decision hung thick in the air, a terrible choice looming before them like the edge of a cliff. "Jenna. We need to warn her," Kyle urged suddenly, terror igniting in his eyes. Just then, the laughter intensified, drowning out everything else, and the attic began to shake. Would they find a way to break the hold of the well? Or would they succumb to the chilling whisper of temptation? Only time would tell as the darkness rushed in a sudden end or a dreadful continuation. Awaited them. What sacrifice would be required to ensure their survival? The darkness pressed in, and for a heartbeat, the world outside the attic felt like a distant dream. Kyle's breath came in quick bursts, mingling with Paul's rising panic. They huddled together, eyes darting around as the shadows morphed into shapes both mesmerizing and terrifying. "Jenna, listen!" Paul shouted, forcing his voice to pierce through the chaos. "You need to stay away from the well." But the laughter morphed again, echoing wildly, drowning out any hope of communication. The attic trembled, the floorboards protesting under the weight of panic. Paul felt the shadows encroach closer, their cold fingers brushing against his legs. Kyle swallowed hard, eyes wide. What if we just look?" "No!" Paul shouted, gripping his friend's shoulders. "That's exactly what it wants. We can't give in to it. It's a trap." Kyle shook his head, uncertainty wrinkling his brow. "But what if it holds answers? What if we can save Jenna?" The mere thought of Jenna inside the house, naive and unaware of the lurking menace, made Paul's heart race. "We can't risk it. We have to find another way," he said, desperation coloring his voice. But the shadows were relentless. "What will you sacrifice?" they hissed from the corners, their voice winding around them like a serpent. "What will you give to save the one you love?" Paul felt it then, a tightening, like a noose, pulling both him and Kyle toward the enticing glow at the center of the room. It glimmered with promise but stank of decay. "Stay close to me." Paul realized he was shouting. "We have to stick together." As they stumbled back, trying to create distance from the well's sickly allure, a low rumble echoed from below, like a beast awakening from slumber. The ceiling above them groaned as if the house itself was laughing at their plight. "Quick! We need to find a way out," Kyle urged, but their movements felt sluggish, weighed down by the oppressive darkness wrapping around them. A sudden crack split through the room, and the shadows shrieked, retreating momentarily. They caught a glimpse of something, a broken window, a chance. "There." Paul pointed, hoping against hope. But just as they turned towards it, an icy grip seized Paul's wrist. He spun to face the source. A figure emerged from the depths of shadow, cloaked in despair. Its face was obscured, but he could see it reached out, fingers elongated, twisting like roots searching for soil. "Let her go," Paul found himself pleading, voice trembling. The figure tilted its head, its presence suffocating. "You would save her," it whispered, breath like winter's chill. "What are you willing to sacrifice, child of the living?" Paul's mind reeled. Was it even possible to lose Jenna? His heart raced as he caught sight of her face, pale and determined, appearing for just a moment beneath the thrumming chaos. She was somewhere close, but how close? An unexpected roar erupted from the darkness, making the walls shake. The shadows pulsed around them, demanding something, anything: blood, fear, despair. "Step forward," the figure urged. "Drink from the well or lose her forever." A sickening dread gripped Paul. Tension coiled around him tighter than any rope. "What if we refuse?" he demanded, voice barely a whisper. Silence stretched, heavy and thick. Then, with a cruel smile, the figure leaned in closer. "Then the well claims what it desires, and you'll never see her again." Paul's skin prickled with 1,000 unvoiced horrors. Without knowing why, he felt something stir within him, a dark curiosity igniting. What if we could bargain? But the laughter returned, fierce and unyielding, as if the very shadows laughed at his hope. "You cannot bargain with the well. It demands a price." Suddenly, Jenna's voice pierced through, fierce and resolute. "Paul! Kyle! Help me!" Their eyes snapped towards the door, but it splintered ominously, shadows creeping through the cracks. The laughter returned, louder this time, a whirlwind of mockery that pushed at their resolve. "Do you see now, boys?" the entity taunted. They could feel its hunger, a gnawing emptiness that echoed their own fears. "The well's thirst is unrelenting. Will you satisfy it?" The attic shook as they grappled, desperate to remain grounded. Time was running out. Every moment spent debating was another moment Jenna was exposed. "What are we going to do?" Kyle asked, panic shooting through his voice. Paul inhaled deeply, forcing out the darkness that tried to swallow him whole. "We'll fight. We can't let it win." With a new resolve, they prepared themselves, ready to face the unknown. But as the shadows lunged forward, would they find strength in each other, or would the depths of the well drag them to their doom? Behind the grasping shadows, a spectral whisper echoed, "The well waits for no one." The shadows pulsed, drawing closer like a dark ocean tide. Paul felt his heartbeat echo his fear, thumping wildly in his chest. Kyle was hyperventilating beside him, eyes darting, panic-stricken. They had to act. The well's call was getting louder, and Jenna's voice, a piercing beacon in the abyss, faded into a desperate cry. "Just hold on, Jenna," Paul shouted, his voice trembling with unspent terror. He had to believe she could hear him, wherever the darkness trapped her. Suddenly, without warning, the figure lunged. Its twisted hands brushed against Paul's cheek, cold as death. He recoiled, stumbling away, but there was nowhere to escape, only the looming abyss behind him. "We have to fight it," Kyle gasped, his voice quaking but steadying. "Do you see it, Paul? It wants us to fear." The laughter crescendoed, sharp and mocking, like nails scraping on glass. Shadows danced wildly across the walls, creating grotesque shapes. One shadow morphed into a monstrous laughing face, eyes wide and gleaming with malice. "It thrives on our fear," Kyle insisted, his resolve igniting a fire between them. With growing determination, Paul took a deep breath. "Together, then. On three." They clasped hands, feeling the warmth of one another's grip. 1, 2, 3. They lunged at the dark figure simultaneously, a flash of adrenaline surging through their veins. The air thickened, ringing with whispers that clawed at their sanity. "Fools! Fools!" The entity reverberated in a sinister chant. Just as they were upon it, the figure twisted away with alarming speed, muting their screams with a rush of darkness. "Back!" Kyle shouted, but it was too late. The shadows enveloped them, a chilling embrace that threatened to suffocate. Suddenly, a harsh light pierced through the dark, illuminating the attic. But it wasn't a salvation, it revealed the truth, too brutal for their minds to process. Amidst the shadows, Jenna lay sprawled on the floor, her eyes wide and brimming with terror. The well-esque glow pulsed behind her, casting horrific shapes across her pale face. "Jenna!" Paul cried out, but his voice trembled in the air, pulling him under once more. "I can feel it pulling me," she screamed, reaching out to them. "You have to get out of here. It wants you. It wants all of us." But the entity let out a guttural snarl, an undercurrent of wrath that reverberated off the walls. "You cannot save her." A surge of cold energy pulsed out like a shockwave, knocking Paul and Kyle to their knees. They gasped for breath, shadows crawling over their skin like insects. A horrific realization settled like a stone in Paul's gut. This wasn't just a test, it was a game, and they were utterly trapped in its grasp. "Jenna, please. Fight it." Paul cried, feeling desperation seep into every corner of his heart. She turned to the well, her expression twisting between fear and determination. "You have to break the cycle," she urged, voice cracking. "We were drawn here for a reason. Find the truth, Paul." The shadows hissed, the laughter booming as Jenna's words dissolved into despair. "Truth is a fleeting shadow," the entity mocked. "It cannot save you." As Paul struggled against the constricting darkness, Kyle gasped, "What if the well holds the key to breaking the curse?" But then the shadows spiraled into a swirling vortex, engulfing them in an impenetrable darkness. The laughter was relentless, a cacophony of torment that shroud of chaos. A chilling whisper floated closer, sharper than the others, wrapping around Paul's mind. "You think you can fight me? All who dare approach the well have lost before." Together, they clawed their way back to their feet, resolve hardening in their hearts. "We will find a way." Paul shouted into the void, adrenaline fueling his defiance. Suddenly, the laughter fell silent, as if the dark entity was contemplating its next move. For a fleeting second, a sense of stillness spread, and the shadows retreated ever so slightly. "Then face the consequences, children of the light," the entity replied, voice dripping with venomous delight. But as Paul met Kyle's determined gaze, something flickered within them, a glimmer of hope against the suffocating fear. They had to confront the well or lose everything, and in that moment, a promise took root. "Whatever it takes," Kyle whispered, fists clenched. But as they steeled themselves for what lay ahead, a chilling chuckle filled the air once more. "The darkness adapts, but can you? What did it know that they didn't?" The well hadn't just claimed souls, it had secrets buried deep beneath its surface, and those secrets were about to unwrap themselves. The shadows momentarily withdrew, like an ominous tide receding from the shore, leaving Paul and Kyle shivering in the sudden stillness. But the fleeting calm could not quell the urgent pulse of anxiety thrumming in their veins. Jenna's figure lay still, caught between the realms of light and darkness, a silent plea for salvation echoing within her frozen expression. "Jenna!" Paul shouted again, fought against the impulse to rush toward her, uncertain of what any movement might trigger. Did the entity's presence shimmer beneath that still surface? Would it lunge at him if he drew closer? Focus! Kyle snapped, adrenaline sharpening his words as he tightened his grip on Paul's arm. We need to act fast before it strikes again. In the midst of the dim light, fear began to morph into clarity. The entire well, with its bubbling secrets and ancient tales whispering to them in the dark, loomed as the crux of their confrontation. If they had any hope of saving Jenna, they needed to understand it. They edged closer to the well, the ominous glow within casting distorted reflections on the walls. Its allure beckoned them, its whispers seductive and frightening. Paul took a hesitant step forward and suddenly, a cacophony of voices erupted around them, shrieking, crying, laughing, a frenzied nightmare that made his skin crawl. Jenna! You have to fight it. Remember who you are. Kyle shouted again, pushing his voice through the chaos. The shadows crackled as if fueling the darkness, an angry edge sharpening all around them. I am trying. Jenna's voice came as if carried from a distance, tremulous with pinned hope and overwhelming dread. But it's calling me, Paul. I can't resist. Then the laughter returned, wrapping around them like a shroud, thoughtless and mocking. Paul squeezed his eyes shut against the noise, recalling the old tales. Kyle, he breathed, his mind racing, the legends talked about a guardian spirit tied to the well. They say it was meant to protect but it spiraled, Kyle interjected, a spark of understanding flickering across his face. It became something dark. We need to summon it, use its power against this thing. With every ounce of courage, they moved toward the well, determination mixing with desperation as they whispered the old chants they could barely remember, weaving words of belief and the spirits of their ancestors into something that could stand against the terror. Guardian of the well. They cried in unison, desperation fueling their voices like fire. Grant us your power. Help us protect the one we love. The shadows jerked, twisting, like a wounded beast. A low growl filled the room, vibrating through the wooden floors. The well pulsated, light spilling from its depths as ancient energy surged toward them, carrying echoes of laughter, sorrow, and a tinge of hope. Too late, children. The entity bellowed, its laughter merging into a roar as the shadows lunged once more. Desperate, Kyle and Paul braced themselves, arms locked tightly. As the entity descended, an explosion of light erupted from the well, brilliant and blinding. Everything erupted into chaos, the laughter twisted into howls, shadows burst like ink-tipped balloons, and in the midst of the storm, a figure emerged, ethereal and fierce. Leave them be. The guardian's voice boomed, echoing rich and commanding. Tension filled the air as the entity screeched, a cacophony of rage erupting from its shadowy form. Jenna! Paul shouted, as she began to rise, hovering, eyes still glazed but flickering with sparks of recognition. Now! Kyle cried, seizing the moment, eyes fixed on his friend. We have to bring her back. Panic tore through him as shadows clawed at the edges of their realm. The guardian stood firm, battling the darkness with blinding illumination, but could it hold? Would it suffice to corral the underlying chaos within the well that threatened to spill over? Time seemed to stretch, and then the shadows surged, a tidal wave of malice aiming straight for Jenna. Desperation clawed at Paul. Jenna, reach for us. Come back. But then, darkness surged. Ahead with a mutant force, masking a familiar silhouette behind the veil, and laughter erupted anew, chilling to the bone. Fools! You think you can outrun what was forged in your blood? Paul's heart dropped as he registered what was unfolding, truth twisted into betrayal. The well's influence slithered through the air in beckoning tones, framing their desperate pleas with malice. All they had done, all they had fought for, was it possible they'd only unleashed the beginning of a far darker nightmare. Trust her, was Paul's last rallying cry as the world plunged back into chaos. But did they? And what price would they ultimately pay to discover the truth? The air crackled with tension, an electric thrill dancing against Paul's skin. Shadows swirled and groaned, their whispers growing louder, a cacophony drowning out any last threads of hope they clung to. Jenna floated disoriented, glimmers of light flickering around her form, yet something darker lurked beneath. "Focus, Jenna. You have to fight." Kyle yelled, desperation clawing at his throat. But fear skewed his voice, the very pitch of it betraying how unsteady they truly were. The entity unleashed another bellow, deep and mocking. "You think you're just going to waltz in and take her back? She belongs to me now. Forever." Paul felt his stomach lurch. It was all spiraling into madness. Jenna, suspended in an unsettling blend of light and darkness, trembled, her eyes teetering between recognition and oblivion. "Let her go." Paul barked, the words boiling in his throat. Maybe he could bluff. "She is stronger than you think. She is human. Humanity is weak." The shadows retorted, a wave of malignant laughter echoing around them, stirring a frantic energy in the well. "Watch how easily they fall." Each laugh bounced off the damp stone, striking them with a chill. The brightness from the well flickered ominously, uncertainty coiling like a serpent around their hearts. Paul took a step forward, reckless courage fueling him despite the pleading grip on his arm from Kyle. "Show her our love, Paul. That's what will break this." Kyle urged, a wild urgency igniting his words. "Jenna. We're here. You're not alone." Paul shouted again, feeling the air thrum with tension. "Please, come back to us. Remember the summers at the lake? Remember how we laughed? The stories we shared? They're waiting for you." Another wave of darkness surged from the well, and Paul felt like he was swimming against a riptide, all his strength waning. But through the chaos, he saw it a flicker, a spark igniting in Jenna's eyes, resting against the greenish haze that threatened to consume her. "Paul," she whispered, her voice cracking, struggling to break free from the entity's control. "I can feel your heart at it so strong, yes. Fight it, Jenna. Feel it." Kyle shouted, desperation transforming into fierce resolve. Suddenly, shadows recoiled as the Guardian unleashed a pulse of radiant light, illuminating the darkened edges. They could feel the warmth, taste the strength. "Come back. Fight for yourself." Paul implored, reaching a trembling hand toward her as the Guardian shielded him, a beacon against the rising storm, the echoes of previous moments, their shared laughter, their fears, the closeness they had felt, cascaded in waves. Jenna's face flickered with hope, but the love they projected collided with the suffocating dread of the entity. "No. You cannot take her from me." The darkness shrieked, a hideous sound of splintering wood, jarring bones, and shattered glass. Paul's heart raced. They had pushed it too far. In a final burst of courage, he lunged toward the well, praying it would hold. "We love you, Jenna. Come back, please. You're not just a vessel for them." In that moment, something shifted, the shadows hesitated, a flicker of fear snaking through their blackened forms. The Guardian's light pulsed in fierce bursts, breaking through the malevolent grip inch by inch, but then, the well trembled violently, growing agitated as if the very ground beneath them had become aware. "Your love means nothing." The entity snarled, sending a wave of icy laughter crashing over them. "This will only end in suffering. Fight, Jenna. Fight." Echoing through the chaos was the warmth of their unity against the bitter chill of betrayal. As the whirlwind of darkness roared again, Jenna's eyes blazed with determination, vivid and alive. The shadows began to swirl tighter, bearing down upon her. Then, with one last scream, the ground shook violently, the well's ancient stones quaking in protest, as Paul shouted, "We want to let you take her." Would their bond be enough? Or would they pay dearly for a truth that had yet to reveal itself? The shadows screamed in agony as the old well pulsated violently, the fabric of reality seeming to stretch as they waited for Jenna to make her choice. The shrieks of the shadows intensified, a cacophony of desperate voices clawing at the edges of reason. Paul and Kyle steadied themselves, hearts pounding fiercely in their chests as the air crackled with an electric tension. Paul felt time freeze, the space between breaths stretched thin, like a thread ready to snap. "Jenna! Please!" Paul barked again, this time desperation lacing his voice. "You have to remember who you are. You're stronger than this darkness." Jenna's face flickered between terror and determination, the shadows wrestling for control. Her eyes brimmed with the struggle as she fought against the pull of the well. I can feel you," she gasped, as if every ounce of strength was pouring into that single wisp of connection. Shadows licked at her, serpentine and hungry, but she stood resolute. The guardian spirit pulsed with light, raising its ethereal arms. "Your bond is your weapon, children of the light. But you must believe." Sweat dripped down Paul's brow as he extended a hand. "Come on, Jenna. Reach for us." An undulating whisper of assurance surged through him, igniting a determination that was both ancient and new. "You're not alone. We're here." Kyle shouted behind him, his voice a war cry against the shadows. "This isn't just your fight, Jenna. We are all in this together." With those words, hope bloomed like a flower in spring. That thought intruded into Jenna's heart, pushing against the shadows wrapped around her soul. "I will not be your prisoner," she screamed, her voice slicing through the mocking laughter of the entity. In that moment, the air shifted. An unseen wave rippled through the darkness. Jenna's gaze sharpened as she locked her eyes on Paul's, the warmth in her heart transforming into a beacon of light. "I choose to fight." The shout surged through her, breaking the chains of despair. The shadows recoiled, and the entity howled in rage. Flickers of light poured from Jenna, encircling her, wiping away the darkness like a cleansing tide. "You will not take me," she cried, stepping forward into the growing light, arms outstretched toward Paul and Kyle. The shadows hissed and screamed, twisting like a tortured soul, yet their vibrant pulses were growing weaker. The guardian coiled around Jenna, its presence a shield against the howling dark. "Together!" Paul shouted, tightening his grip around Kyle as they surged forward, matching the energy emanating from Jenna. They pulled her closer as the old tales crashed against the silence, stories of loss, pain, and unwavering love hearkening to their minds. Each story spurred them on, a relentless reminder that they were more than just victims of fate. That blinding light, their laughter echoed, reminiscent of those joyful afternoons, painting verdant memories that soared above the swirling shadows. "Remember us. Remember the love." Kyle shouted, knowing deeply that emotions were their heart's true weapon. The well writhed, erupting in a monstrous roar. "No. You cannot escape. You belong to me." The deeper the entity voiced its aggression, the more potent the flickering light became. "Yes. We do." Jenna cried defiantly, now aglow with strength. "We are not your playthings. We choose each other." The guardian expanded, pulsating with life as Jenna's voice carried across dimensions. The darkness thundered, shadows breaking apart like glass, spilling reflections of those long lost. Echoes intertwined with the present faces of the children trapped, yearning for freedom, reshaped the very fabric of reality. "Let them go." Paul shouted, each word a hammer striking through the shroud of despair. The entity shrieked, the high-pitched noise cutting like daggers. It was fear born of desperation, terrified by what light and love could shatter. Bright light surged from Jenna, stacking against the shadows, igniting the air with hope as if the universe itself aligned with their fight. "Release them." The room exploded in brightness, shadows unraveling under the weight of their resolve. The laughter shifted, fraying into cries of anguish and fear as the shadowy entity lost its grip. "Leave! Leave! Leave!" The specter bellowed, fuzzy outlines of the lost souls swirling in a kaleidoscope of emotions. In a final moment that felt stretched beyond believing, Paul lunged for Jenna, hand clasping hers tightly. "Yes. Together." With one last tidal wave of energy, light slammed against the darkness, scattering it like mist in the morning sun. The well gasped, collapsing into a void before them, ancient secrets revealed in sparkling clarity, then silence enveloped them as shadows disintegrated, leaving only a reflective calm behind. Paul and Kyle stood there, breathless and wide-eyed, feeling the warmth of Jenna's presence filling the void left behind. Did we win? Kyle's voice trembled, the soft light painting their expressions with awe. I think we did, Paul murmured, clutching Jenna tightly, heart soaring against the remnants of fear that lingered. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, laughter echoed, spilling out into the world beyond. The evening light fell gently around them, glistening like tears of joy, but the moment hung delicate, like a fragile thread. Together, they faced the ancient well, a symbol of both trials and victories. The darkness had retreated for now, but they knew there would always be shadows that needed light. Let us go home, Jenna whispered, the horizon beckoning like a warm embrace. And as they turned, hand in hand, they stepped forward, knowing that together, they could face whatever darkness lay ahead, forever bound by their hearts. Now, before you go, you need to subscribe immediately to our channel so you don't miss any exclusive stories coming your way. This is the moment to show your support. Smash that like button now to help us feed the algorithm. We want to hear your reactions and theories about this ending, so flood the comments section. And don't wait even one more second. Share this video with at least 5 friends who urgently need to see this conclusion. Your support is what fuels the magic we create together. Do it now.